Hi everyone, I'm Wendy and today I'm showing you how to make my whole food plant-based lasagna. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I like to make fast and easy meals, and lasagna doesn't exactly fall into that category. But even though it takes a little extra time and a few more steps, each step is still very simple. And I think it's worth the extra effort for that delicious lasagna flavor. So let me show you how it's done. You'll want to make sure you have all of your components ready before you start assembling your lasagna. So let's talk about each layer. Of course, we need some kind of marinara sauce. This recipe uses about 2 jars of store-bought marinara. If you have one you love, feel free to use that. But if you want an SOS-free marinara, you can try my recipe, which I'll link to below the video and on screen. Next, you need some kind of pasta layer or a vegetable substitute. I'm using a combination of both, but you can use one or the other if you prefer. So I'm using these brown rice lasagna noodles that are made with just brown rice and water. These don't need to be boiled ahead, we'll just be layering them and cooking them right in the lasagna. Then for some of the layers, I'm also using thin slices of zucchini. You can either slice these with a mandolin, a vegetable peeler, or just slice as thinly as you can using a chef's knife. Next, I'm making a bean layer. To make this, I added 2 cans of drained and rinsed Great Northern beans to my food processor. Then I'll season this layer with some granulated onion and garlic, and I happen to have some fresh basil, so I'm adding a decent handful of that. I'll blend it together and that's it for this layer. When I don't have fresh basil, I just add in about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning instead. As an alternative, you could also use tofu instead of the white beans to make more of a vegan ricotta layer. Then I have a mushroom and onion layer. For that, I preheated a skillet and added 1 small sliced onion. Today I used a red onion, but any variety is fine. At the same time, I'm also adding sliced button mushrooms. I usually pick whichever one looks best at the store that day. So this time I'm using white, but cremini would work too. I'll spread these out and let them cook for about 5 minutes at a time before stirring. Onions and mushrooms have a lot of liquid that comes out, so you shouldn't need to add any water. After about 5 minutes, you can see lots of water has started coming out. I'll go ahead and stir these around and let them go another 5 minutes or so. You don't need to babysit these constantly, but I do recommend putting on a timer so you don't forget to check them. I'll continue this process until most of the water has evaporated. At that point, you may need to stir a little more frequently and add splashes of water if anything starts to stick. Continue cooking until the onions and mushrooms start to caramelize, and then you can set them aside until you're ready to assemble. Last but not least, I also made some vegan Parmesan to sprinkle on top. I make this differently every single time, but I always use some combination of nuts and seeds along with rolled oats and a little bit of nutritional yeast. Sometimes I also add granulated onion and garlic or Italian seasoning, but sometimes I leave it plain. So mix up a batch of your favorite recipe and set that aside. And now I have every component ready so I can start layering. I'm using my 9 by 13 inch casserole dish. Depending on the exact size of the dish you're using, you may end up using more or less of each ingredient. Start by adding a layer of marinara. I like to go a little heavy on the first layer to make sure the noodles on the bottom have plenty of liquid. Then I add a layer of my rice pasta. I don't try to make it perfectly even, I just fit them in there and break a few pieces to get it as best I can. As I mentioned earlier, if you prefer not to use pasta, you could do a layer of zucchini noodles here instead. Then I add a little more marinara and spread that out, and I'm topping that with the white bean mixture. I'll have 2 layers of this, so I'm using about half of the mixture. I add little dollops of the white beans and then spread it out. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and as you spread it out, it might mix in with some of the marinara sauce. But as my grandfather used to say, it's all going to the same place. Plus, it's going to be covered up so it doesn't have to be pretty. Next up is the sautéed onions and mushrooms. I'm only going to do 1 layer of this, so you'll put all of it on here now and spread it out evenly. Then we have another layer of marinara, followed by our zucchini noodle layer. As I mentioned before, you can mix and match the noodle layers, so if you wanted to do all pasta, feel free to do that. But since I'm doing a combo, I'm actually going to add a little more marinara and go straight into another pasta layer, followed by even more marinara sauce. You can layer your lasagna however you want. Have some fun with it. Comment below with how you like to make your lasagna and what are your favorite layers and ingredients to include. Next, I'm adding the rest of the white bean mixture, once again adding little dollops and spreading it out as well as you can. Then we're heading into the home stretch with just a few more layers left. Add a little more marinara sauce on top of the white bean mixture and then another layer of zucchini noodles. A little more marinara on top of that, followed by my final layer of pasta. And I'm just filling it in with little broken pieces that I have left over to try to get the best coverage. The last layer for now is marinara. I like to do a little bit thicker layer on top, just like I did on the very bottom. After this bakes for a while, I'll add some of that vegan Parmesan, but for now, I'm covering this with foil. I know many of you prefer not to use foil. I personally don't mind it for casseroles like this since it's not coming into contact with my food. But if you prefer, you could put a layer of parchment on first and then just use the foil to secure the parchment. If you're using pasta noodles, I recommend following the instructions on the back of the box because different pasta may need different cooking times and temperatures. If you're just using zucchini, you can follow my instructions here. I'm baking it in a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for about 50 minutes covered. Then I'll take the foil off and bake another 10 to 15 minutes uncovered. You can add the vegan Parmesan on top at this point, or you can save that and sprinkle it on right at the end before serving. And that's all there is to it. Even though I tend to be a lazy cook, I think this one is worth the extra effort. It's so delicious, and I don't miss the added salt, oil, and cheese that comes with a traditional lasagna. This is the perfect meal to nourish your family at those upcoming holiday gatherings. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.